the extraordinary fact that Al-Qaeda now has conquered and, taken over a country. This all began, as, the war on terror was about fighting Al-Qaeda. And he just jumped to the future and said, okay, Al-Qaeda is actually taking over a whole country and we're cool with it. What's going on? What has happened? This is just beyond, and again, there's another ethno-supremacist power that we use because they serve our purposes.
That's true. It's, the 9/11, this greatest attack on the United States, it's Al-Qaeda. And now we're working with them. How can we have...
Yeah, well, and it's not the first time we worked with them, over the last 20 years.
Are survivors of the 9/11 attacks or family members of people that lost loved ones, are they aware that the U.S. government is now supporting the regime, the organization that attacked our country, that brought down
I'm
the
sure
towns?
At least a few of them are. I mean, it generally doesn't make it into the narrative, but it has. It's not like this has been completely covered up within U.S. I'll look at New York Times, their Daily Digest or whatever, and they actually have admitted, the Al-Qaeda connections to HTS. I think you don't, like if you're watching Fox News, you probably would never know it now. But, that's what Fox News was all about at one point, was fighting Al-Qaeda.
Right.
But look where we are. It's just that we are now the reverse of everything, the opposite of everything we claim to be. And we're again, all our enemies have become our friends. And
right. But I mean, it seems like the connection between Israel and Al-Qaeda goes back quite a ways, because you said they were funding Al-Nusra and actually treating wounded Al-Nusra soldiers or the Syrian civil war.
Yeah, providing them with logistical support. And, that was back 2012, around that time. So
right, and Al-Nusra is just the second iteration of Al-Qaeda.
Right.
Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra.
Yeah, Al-Nusra is basically was just Al-Qaeda in Syria, and then HTS was just a rebranding. Same people, Al-Julan.
Right. Do you know how far back that this connection goes, where Israel was working with Al-Qaeda? Do you know? Probably nobody knows.
It's certainly possible it goes farther back. Probably does. But, in the case of the...
Pre 9/11?
I don't think so. We can get
dancing
into that.
Israelis?
Yeah.
Do you want to go there?
Well, you can say, okay, they just say, there is clear evidence that the Israelis knew what was going to happen. I don't think they were directing it or anything, but they knew what was going to happen. They understood it was actually to their advantage.
You're talking about 9/11.
9/11, exactly.
So you think they knew?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. There's the dancing Israelis. That's actually made it into Fox News. Later they deleted it, but it was on their website for several days. That these Israelis, they clearly were connected to the Mossad, and they were overjoyed. They knew what was going to happen. They saw it, and they just celebrated. And because I think they understood that this was kind of like, okay, this is a disaster for the U.S., but it brings the U.S. in on our side, and we can get them to go after our perceived enemies, namely Iraq. Yeah, and then, Iran and Syria were also on the list. Now they got Syria. And, in the Middle East, it's just Lebanon, and I don't think, Lebanon has been greatly weakened already, and Iran.
Oh, man, it's so crazy. If that's really true, if they knew about 9/11, and there's also the USS Liberty incident, the Levant affair, and then everybody here is just like, America, Israel's our greatest ally. Yeah. It's like, what? This is crazy. This is so crazy.
Yeah, sometimes like the Israelis themselves think it's kind of crazy. There is a tape of Netanyahu, I think better than 20 years ago, talking to some supporters. I think it may have been in one of those illegal settlements, and saying he says, well, I can get the U.S. to do whatever I want them to do. He's just bragging. He says it's just crazy, It's
It is. It really is so crazy. How come people can't wake up? I mean, I guess it's just the Israeli control over media, right? And our congressmen, our politicians.
Right.
And
that's an awful lot of it. But, as we said earlier, it's also Christian Zionism, which is something that grew up independent of all that. now it's, kind of merged with that, with the Jewish Zionism and the state of Israel and its obvious influence over our government. But Christian Zionism is something that actually antedated Jewish Zionism.
Do Christian Zionists, do they believe that all the Christians need to leave the Holy Land too? Is that really what they support?
They don't, I don't think they even regard them as Christians, or they just don't even want to hear about it. So, people will bring them up with it, and they just I think they just look the other way. I remember
they want white Christians. That's their idea.
Yeah, maybe. Well, they're at least like in the early phase of Christian Zionism, there was some concern. I mean, not all those people were bad people. I think they, many of them were well-intentioned. And they started to notice some of these problems. Like, hey, wait a second, there are Christians there and they're suffering. They're being dispossessed by Zionism. But those voices were silenced long ago. And now I don't think any Christian Zionists, first of all, they don't know. They learn about it. They don't want to know. So they just kind of forget about it if somebody mentioned they're Christians. Or maybe they outright say, oh, these are just Christian heretics and we don't care.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't actually heard that, but I'm just guessing,
Right. It just, I find it a hard thing to wrap my head around. The phenomenon of Christian Zionism is incredibly bizarre. That, Jerusalem, these places, Nazareth, Bethlehem, everybody reads about in the Bible as a Christian, we got the birthplace of Jesus Christ,
right.
There's the Holy Sepulchre, everything is there.
Right, and there are large Christian populations, they're large but dwindling, because of the persecution by the Israelis, really.
Right.
In Bethlehem, Nazareth.
And you're supporting the destruction of the ancient home of Christianity.
Yeah, well, this is what's already happened. I mean, there was a large Christian population in Iraq, and it's almost completely gone. Because Saddam Hussein, for all his faults, he did protect religious minorities. He protected the Christians. So there were Christians in his government. But after the downfall of Saddam Hussein, then all hell broke loose, and the sectarian extremists came out from the shadows and began attacking Christian communities, and they fled, and so it's gone. Now I'm afraid we're going to see the same thing in Syria,
right?
And then these are ancient communities that, like in Syria, these are like some of the oldest communities of Christians that they've been there since the very beginning, the first Christians. I think it was actually in Damascus, or was another Syrian city. The first time the Christians were referred to as Christians. Okay, that community that was described as Christian was actually in current day Syria, and so you can get a sense of how old these Christian communities are.
And it may not survive.
They may not survive, and same thing for Lebanon.
There's
just no concern within the the Western government.
Over 2,000 years of Christianity in this community, and we're going to let and Christian Zionists are supporting the destruction of it. The oldest church, Orthodox Church, oldest Christian church, was destroyed in Gaza.
Right.
And I think something like 30 Christians were killed there, mostly children, when it happened. Yeah. It's just like And then we're just silent. We're no. It's hard for me to. It's disgusting. It's just hard for me to understand.
It is disgusting. It is.
Like, if you're a Christian, I guess your mind has been twisted so much to just think that the enemy is Islam. They just assume that all of these countries, they're all Islamic, and this is a holy war, and Israel is kind of on our side on this holy war, without having any understanding of what's going on there. We think about like Hezbollah, where it's a terrorist organization. They were the ones that protected the Christian communities in Syria and Lebanon against ISIS, where Israel was supporting ISIS.
Or supporting Al-Qaeda anyway. Yeah.
Al-Nusra, Al-Nusra. The whole thing is just so bonkers, and it's just so sad. If you're a true Christian and respect the history and the ancient faith of it, it's being erased from the Middle East. Thanks to
it's very sad. It's very sad. Yeah.
But it's thanks to the support of Christians in America, Zionist Christians, and a large part. If they didn't have that support, things would be different here in America.
I think it would be. There's still the Zionist influence would be very powerful, but there would be a chance for at least you would have more dissent certainly on the Republican side of the aisle. Because of the power of the Christian Zionists, it's virtually nil. You have Thomas Massey, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
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 Actually, I know Thomas Massey was one of the few people, like after the fall of Syria, he did call on all Christians in this country to pray for the Christian communities in Syria because the persecution had already begun.
It's crazy. Yeah, I don't know if they'll survive. I don't.
Yeah.
Probably not. They're gonna flee, and then the last bastions of Christianity in the Middle East are just going to be kind of wiped out.
Yeah.
Good. Go America. Go.
That's right. That's exactly what's happening.
How can we change? Can Christian Zionism, is it a force that can be stopped? It just seems impossible to educate somebody that is a Christian Zionist or is a Zionist to speaking about it, rationally without being overly emotional and to change somebody's mind on this position. Right. I mean, is there any way that you could reach out to people and stop this sort of, I would almost call it a heretical version of Christianity?
Oh yeah, clearly it's a grievous distortion of the Christian faith, and it doesn't have. It's really quite recent. I mean, it began in the late 19th century or mid 19th century in England and Ireland, but it was very much a fringe movement, and it's not. It later, after it spread to the United States, it began to actually gain traction, especially in the early 20th century. But it was still fringe for a long time. It was really, towards around the time of the 6-Day War, it was already becoming a real force. And the 6-Day War kind of just gave it a huge boost. They felt like the prophecies were coming true, and it's now, I don't know what the percentages are, but they're quite high within Protestant and evangelical communities. There's it may be the kind of the default, the majority point of view. And yeah, it's something that, they've made a part of their faith. So like if you attack it, they feel like you're attacking their faith. And so that's really hard to get to them. Obviously some people do wake up, and all you can do is lay the facts out there and just hope that some people have the courage to admit them. And it does happen, but I think it's really quite rare.
Right. Yeah. I think this Christian Zionism is, it's just something that I don't think will disappear from the United States. It's really part of the fabric of American identity, American culture. Right. Even if Israel collapses and falls, you're still going to have people in the U.S. that are going to think that we're going to have to rebuild Israel. We have to go back. And they'll probably think that's part of my, obviously, make America great again. The joke is really make Israel great again. That's something that critics of Trump has put up, but that's really how I think for them it's one and the same thing. That's the problem. So like if America goes into obvious decline, there's a huge economic crisis, Israel falls, they'll think that, well, we'll have to recreate Israel to strengthen America. I think that's probably how many of them will think, and that's the policy they'll actually push for. Right. And because Zionism is just so powerful in the United States, thanks to Christian Zionism, he'll find the support for it.
I mean, Jewish Zionism is a big part of it.
Right.
And then there are a lot of people that are completely secular, and they're just as zealous in their Zionism. I would point to like Biden, he's a nominal Catholic, or Nancy Pelosi, but they're just as Zionist as Chuck Schumer or Hagee, even though their Zionism does not have a religious dimension.
And it is such a strange thing, especially for secular people, because we talked about that the U.S. is supporting ethno-supremacist states now. Yeah. And that's what Israel is. It's an expansionist, ethno-supremacist state. And that's our root for, if you're not secular, if you aren't a Christian Zionist, somehow you think that this is a good idea. That, let's support this. We'll throw all of our money behind this to keep on expanding this ethno-supremacist state.
Right. Well, when you look at Western Europe, I mean, they don't have Christian Zionism The Jewish presence is very small. It's there, and it does matter in places like France and the UK. But by and large, all of these leaders are secular, and they're fervent supporters of Zionism.
Well, are they just fervent supporters of Zionism because of the United States, though?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's more than that, especially look at a place like Germany. Unfortunately, they've got the idea that to somehow wash away the sin of Nazism, one of the ways to do it is to be just an absolute, fervent supporter of Zionism.
Are they thinking that, well, we committed a genocide, so if we support this genocide, it cancels out that genocide? Is that what they're thinking?
I don't think that's how they're thinking. They're just not thinking very clearly at all. But it clearly there are. It's not just. I'm sure there's no question about it. American influence is huge. Influence on the culture and politics is huge, but it's more than that. And I think for whatever reason, that's how a lot of these European leaders have decided that, we have this historical sin, and the only way to wash it away is always to support Israel. And it's obviously doesn't make sense, but that's the way they think.
But no country outside of Israel, the U.S., is as Zionist as America, right?
Right.
America is clearly the most, and so that's the.
It's really very powerful in both Germany and the UK. It's surprisingly powerful, but it's powerful among the elites, really, because I think you find much more dissent in those countries.
Right,
in
the
UK,
people don't support it. Christian
Yeah.
Zionism isn't the same phenomenon.
Yeah, right.
These
So
are not
there's
really Christians so much in Europe anymore. They're kind of all secular.
Yeah, well, they were never Christian Zionists. That was that's something that just didn't. It was never more than a very, very fringe movement in a very small part of Europe. But the elites there are, they are very Zionist. They're secular, but they're extremely Zionist. But I know in the UK, a majority of the population is actually supports the Palestinians. It just doesn't make any difference. We have governments that just, ignore what their people want.
Yeah. Well, you touched on this before, but I'd like you to kind of speak about it again. If Israel collapses, it's just going to shatter that Zionist movement in the United States, right? How will it affect the U.S. society? Will just things break down? What would happen? Being a Zionist is such a
I don't know.
part of America.
Yeah, right. Like we said, obviously Zionism has just become inextricably intertwined with American patriotism, with the American identity, and so a severe blow to Zionism, like the actual fall of Israel, its defeat in a war, is going to have huge repercussions in this country, not just within the foreign policy establishment, which of course is what will happen, when Russia wins the war in Ukraine. But in the case of Israel, it's going to be something that's going to is something that, the average person is going to be greatly affected by. And I don't pretend to know how they're going to react. I actually just, earlier in this program, I mentioned one possibility. It's just like they're going to insist on actually rebuilding. It's like, starting the project all over again, because making Israel great is part of making America great again. That's one possibility. I don't know. I really don't know, because it's a very strange phenomenon that's not rational. So it's hard to predict these outcomes. And I don't pretend to say that I know what will happen. I just know that the repercussions are going to be huge.
Yeah, it's going to break minds across America.
Yeah, right.